What's going on, guys? It's the Unhinged Engineer here. Now, these days, getting a job at an engineering company can feel like a crapshoot. Everything from applications to early interviews to late stage technical and behavioral interviews to the final salary negotiation stage. There's just a ton of different things you have to manage throughout the process of trying to get an engineering job. And as a result, it can be really difficult to figure out why you did or did not get the results you were looking for. So today I want to lay out 5 common pitfalls I've seen engineers deal with throughout their application processes, myself included. So I've applied to lots of companies, I've interviewed at lots of companies. Some of those have been successful, others not so much. And I think I've learned a lot from those experiences, and I want to share with you 5 of the most common culprits as to why you might not be getting all the way to the end into a final job offer. So like I said, I'm the Unhinged Engineer. I make professional development content for other young engineers like myself. And if that's something you're interested in, then this is a channel for you. Let's talk about 5 reasons you might not be getting hired. Each of these is associated with a certain stage of the application process. So first we're going to talk about apps, then we're going to get through resumes, interviews, and ultimately to the very end if you're doing an on-site or something like that. So starting off with applications, the biggest mistake I've made in my past and seen other people make is just not applying to stuff, mainly because you think you're not qualified. So people look at job recs and get really intimidated because there's always a ton of stuff. It's really, really technical. It seems like an incredibly high bar. But something to note is that it's a dirty secret industry-wide that all of these job recs are really, really aggressive and kind of overcompensating for a lot of the roles. The reality on the other side, also being somebody who's worked in engineering companies and seen interviews for new candidates from the other perspective. The reality is there's no such thing as a perfect candidate, and the odds that somebody has literally every single thing on a job rec in spades and has all the other intangibles that they couldn't write down is very, very low. Job recs are intentionally super demanding for a few different reasons. For one, it has a desired effect on the company's end for filtering out low quality candidates in the beginning and attracting potentially overqualified candidates. If it is an overestimate and somebody is downplaying their own value and then applies to a rec at a certain level, they're getting someone at a discount effectively. Another couple reasons is it gives people more plausible deniability, right? So there's lots of protections about what you can or cannot reject a candidate for. And so the more you say you expect out of candidates, the more actually legal stuff you can say you denied them for. And then another one is leverage, right? If you set a high bar with the job rec, then when it comes time to actually negotiate for salary, you can say, well, for someone of your qualification, which are being compared against a very demanding bar, this is all we can offer you. So they offer you less money. So there's lots of reasons it's in a company's best interest to overcompensate with a job rec rather than undercompensate. Now, there are lots of other considerations as to why there's no such thing as perfect candidate, and these companies know that, and they know that you don't have to have everything on the job rec to actually get it. For one, in a lot of situations, especially if they're talent restricted, if they have more work than they have people to do it, it's a mutual trade. You need a job, but they also need an engineer. So they realize there's no perfect candidate, and if they sit around waiting for that perfect candidate forever, they're just not gonna get the work they need done. They might be looking to fill roles at multiple levels. Maybe they're looking to build out a simulations team or flight software team or a thermals team, and they need a senior person, a mid-level person, an entry-level person. If they just put out a bunch of very demanding recs, then they're gonna mostly get good people, but could potentially manipulate who gets put at what level to fill the different roles after the fact. That's something that I've seen happen very, very frequently. Last one I'll mention here, while all these job recs are demanding, they are demanding different things. And so if you aren't meeting the bar, like if you are missing too many things for one specific job rec, then they could just punt you to another team. Like if you don't meet their already inflated standards, but they can tell that you're actually a reasonably good candidate and someone that they'd be willing to hire in general, they'll punch you to other teams, and then you get more opportunity even after just having applied once. What's the main point here? Just freaking apply. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Just send in the application. I mean, obviously don't be insane. Like if you have 3 years of experience, don't apply for a principal engineering role that needs 15 years of experience. I'm not advocating for that. But there are lots of times that I've looked at a job rec and it's been kind of borderline. Like, I almost have enough years of experience and they want a master's and I don't have one, but I've got 4 of the 5 different experience areas they want, and I know 6 of the 8 tools that they need me to be able to use. Just freaking apply, because nobody's gonna fit all the stipulations of a job rec, and you're rejecting yourself by not applying. So you might as well throw it in there. The worst they can say is no. Next one I want to talk about is searching for jobs. First one is just kind of applications in general. Now I'm talking about actually going out and looking for jobs. Kind of the default way that most people look for jobs, myself included early in my career, is searching for jobs by specific roles, by a specific title. Now, I think there's several reasons that this isn't ideal, at least in my experience. For one, these search bars are pretty finicky, and so by picking a specific role, you're constraining both the search bar and your own thinking to be very, very narrow in terms of what roles you're considering yourself for. So again, you're rejecting yourself from a lot of roles you didn't think of just by virtue of the fact that you're not searching for them. So if you do it this way, you're gonna have to go down very narrow rabbit holes one at a time that is much more time consuming than some of the other methods I'm gonna mention here. Some of those include searching by company. If there's a company you really, really like, go to their website and look at what jobs they're trying to fill. Look at what different teams there are, how it's structured. You can learn a lot about a company just from reading the job recs, and you can probably see a bunch of different roles or teams or lines of business that you are qualified for that wouldn't have come up if you just picked, a priori, oh, I want this kind of role specifically, search for it, and then nothing from that company came up. Searching by area or industry is kind of the same thing. Find an industry or a field that you're looking to get into, look at the best companies that are in that field, and then go do what I just described. Search by company, look at what they have available, etc., etc. The last one is geography. This kind of feels obvious, but I've heard lots of people say stuff like, I want to move to the West Coast, or I want to stay on the East Coast, or I want to go down South, and then they just randomly search again by roles, and they try to filter in different ways. And I would just do what I'm describing here. Go look at, hey, what are the best aerospace companies in California, or what are the best aerospace companies in Texas or Alabama? Then look at who's there, who are the big players, who have the most job recs, and then go to their sites and do what I'm describing. Instead of just going flight software engineer, a million jobs come up and then you're filtering after the fact. It's just way less effective. So be more creative in how you're searching for these roles rather than just going, okay, what's a title I think I could get? Well, I think I could be a GNC engineer and then searching for it. It just won't go as well. Yeah, and the last point I'll mention is even when you're not looking for a job, it's really good to do the things I just described in general. Be cognizant of what companies are doing what work in what areas, where those companies are located. If you really are starting to near a job hunt, like you can feel it coming, you want to move on to the next thing, then start thinking about what their different teams are and what their different roles are and reaching out on LinkedIn, doing that kind of stuff. Just always have warm leads in the mix. Be aware of your industry. Don't lock into your technical work too hard. Like, you are a part of a larger ecosystem, especially when it comes to getting jobs. If you're a viewer of this channel, you probably know there's a lot more to getting these jobs than just the technical stuff you do. So while you're doing that technical stuff at your work, even if you're not looking for a job, make sure you keep your options open and be aware of who's doing what and where you could slot in. Let's assume we found a job that we want, we're gonna apply for it, and now we're sending our resume. Let's talk about the biggest mistake I've seen a ton of people make when it comes to this step. Before a human sees your resume, it's likely to go through an ATS or applicant tracking system. Effectively, it's just a computer scanning your resume for different qualifications, usually denoted by keywords. And there's lots of different HR software services that do this. They all suck. It's gonna get processed in some way, pre-processed in some way, before it actually gets to a recruiter, because otherwise they'd have just so many resumes that they couldn't parse them all. Now, depending on the format of your resume, it can get through that applicant tracking system either really cleanly and intact or super mangled. And I know this firsthand because when I was younger, I would handcraft my resume in Adobe Creator and align everything manually myself and get it pixel perfect. And then when I put it into something like Workday was just a common one that I freaking hated. It would come through like mangled. The bullets would be associated with the wrong experiences and the years would be wrong. And the locations wouldn't auto-populate. And I'd think in my head, Workday must just suck at parsing resumes. That is true. But aside from the fact, doing everything custom, these parsers didn't know what to do. These things are really, really dumb. This is all the more reason to actually use a standardized template. So aside from the human perspective, which if it's standard, you get a little bit of ethos there. They're just familiar with the format and know where to look. And it's a more frictionless experience for the recruiter. Aside from the human perspective, there's also the computer's perspective, which if you feed this data into the computer in a standardized format that is something it can expect to see, then everything's going to come through clean and it's going to get to the human or get parsed in a correct way. So just a couple of examples I have listed out. One last point here. Always submit it as a PDF. Don't submit it as a Google Doc. Don't submit it as a docx, like a Word document. Always, even if you edit it in Word, convert it to a PDF and then send that, right? Because again, PDF is a very standard file format. Just using Word as an example, If you send them a docx, if they're using a different version of Word or you have certain fonts enabled that they don't have, it might just come out looking like crap. Make sure you standardize it by using a standard template and then always submitting as a PDF. Never, never, never submit as a docx or anything else. Next piece is more of a psychological one as we get into the interview. So we're talking to the recruiter, we're going through the screening, hiring manager, and up to that last piece, which is the actual on-site and the super technical round. So just a mindset shift I think is important to make. It's kind of talking about this Pareto distribution on your resume. Most people, because they put so much work into their resume, myself included, think everything on their resume is super, super important, and that's critical. The recruiter and the hiring manager know about everything on the resume. The reality is that's just not true. Even if everything on your resume is important to you, chances are there's only a few things, if not just one thing on your resume, that's really important to whoever's hiring you. So don't evenly distribute the time and attention you give to everything on your resume, right? Identify what's going to be the most important, the most relevant, and the most impressive to whoever you're talking to, and then tailor the conversation to that. Just because everything's on your resume doesn't mean everything needs to be talked about in the interview. That's okay. Some likely candidates for what they care about the most. Very, very common one is just your last or current role. Whatever you're doing right now, they're looking at what you're doing, they think it's cool, they want you to do it for them. Other likely candidates, the role that's closest to the one that you're applying for. So this is straightforward, whether it's closest in title or closest in scope of work. Even if it's 2 jobs ago, right? So not your last role, even if it's been a little while, the role that's closest to the one you're applying for is very likely to be of interest to them, regardless of how long ago it was. That could also be true of the company. Like maybe you're applying for a job in the aerospace industry, but you've kind of been on and off in the aerospace industry. Maybe they're very adamant about hiring aerospace people and they want to know what you did in that industry specifically, not what you did in a biomedical role, general mechanical engineering role, something else. And the last one might even be like a sub-experience piece. Like maybe it's one bullet on your resume or one project on your resume. That's just the one thing that jumped out of them. I've seen that happen a ton of times where somebody might not even be the best candidate, but they have one thing that's really, really good and a really, really high draw for the employer, and they get through. People don't think about it, but that's the reality. What's the point here? Spend different amounts of time talking about different things depending on their interest. So know your customer. Don't just do the general elevator pitch that's the same for everybody and kind of how you would describe yourself if you didn't know what they were looking for. Be very, very specific. Hyper focus on the good stuff. Spend the majority of the conversation talking about that, because a bunch of things that are kind of interesting usually is not going to be the thing that moves the needle, but it's going to be one or a small subset of things that are really, really kick-ass. That's what's going to get you through the next round. So don't be afraid to hyper-index on that stuff. The last point here is not prepping enough. So I am a prep fanatic, but I also understand where people come from when they say, I don't want to overly rehearse, I don't want to overly drill, it makes me nervous, or I sound like a robot or something else. I get where people are coming from, but I personally prep like a maniac, and I think you should too. So here's why. Preparation is not about memorization, it's about delivery. When people think about preparing for an interview, they pick a few questions that are likely to come up, which we'll talk about a few in a moment, but they pick a few questions that are likely to come up, they rehearse them, and then they, even if they do rehearse them, either they rehearse it briefly or not at all, because they say, well, I don't want to sound like a robot, and I think I know how to answer that question, and I'm going to be fine. That assumes that the preparation you're doing is specifically about the things you're preparing for. That's not actually why we're preparing. We're preparing for general confidence. So we're preparing to be able to handle the thing we didn't prepare for. If you have basic communication skills, chances are you don't need to prepare for a question like, tell me about yourself. Like if you know anything about yourself and you have basic communication skills, you can probably get that through. But if you haven't prepared for that at all, and you're using all your mental bandwidth on things you could have prepped for, and then something you weren't prepared for comes up, you're not going to be as well equipped to handle it. So when I prepare for as many things as possible, knowing that whether or not I hit that specific thing is not what matters. What matters is I did the preparation, and I'm going to be more confident when something I didn't prepare for actually comes up. By this logic, the bar for what's meaningful preparation is actually lower than you think. Like it doesn't take a ton of preparation. An hour-long interview can be prepared for in 20, 30 minutes, right? A full on-site that might be 5 or 6 hours could be prepared for in like 2 good hours. It doesn't take a ton of stuff. It's certainly more time effective than doing something like LeetCode, where we're getting through the top 150 problems is going to take you hours and hours and hours if you can even do it. I can't do it. Preparing for these actual conversations, the bar bar is not that high. Just run through a few different questions, look at a few different bullets on your resume, and just be prepared to talk about them, drill it once or twice each, and then just move on. It doesn't have to be insane. You're not training to be a Navy SEAL. Get the reps in, feel warmed up, and feel ready to go so that when something you're not prepared for comes up, you're better equipped to handle it. A few questions that you might want to prepare for, just as examples. For one, tell me about yourself. That's like the obvious, you should always have that prep. Why do you want to work at company X? This is very, very common and extremely mission-driven companies. If there's a grand vision to the company and that's a really big part of their culture, they're going to want to know whether you buy in, right? Whether you drink the Kool-Aid. So be prepared to talk about why you're interested in that company. I just want a job is not enough. Same thing goes for the role. These roles are hyper-specific or kind of prestigious. They want to know you actually give a shit. They want to know that you're really interested in this role and it's aligned with your career goals and that you're going to stick it out and you're going to really contribute in a meaningful way. Just it's a job is not good enough rationale. And then the last one, I think this is always good to prep for. What part of the role do you think you're best suited for or worse? In other words, if they ask you to sell yourself, like, why do you think you're prepared for this role, right? Instead of why are you interested in this role, why do you think that you're a good fit for this role? They might also ask you, I've gotten this a lot before, tell me the parts of this role you think you're best suited towards and the parts of this role that you're least suited towards. For the record, always be honest. People want to know that you're self-aware, that you're honest, and that you can learn. So tell them if there's parts of it that you're not prepared for, that you haven't done before, and you're going to have to learn on the job. If you demonstrate that you can identify what you need to learn and actually go out and learn it, that's going to be super appealing to them because it's somebody who's coachable, it's someone who's going to grow with a team, and again, stick through it for the long haul. So these are all just questions to prep for. I could make a whole video talking about high probability questions that you should have answers prepared for, but like I said, you don't really have to prep a ton for these. Like, it's not about hitting every possible question. It's just about getting some reps in, getting warmed up, and feeling loose going into it so you're more natural and can more naturally handle things you didn't prepare for. So in conclusion, here's why you're not getting hired. The first one is you're not applying in the first place. Even if you don't think you're qualified and you don't hit every single note of the job rec, just send your application in there. If you're searching by a specific role, you're locking yourself out of a bunch of different options you might not have thought of. I have gotten tons of jobs and internships in my past that I didn't even know the role existed, so I never would have searched for. Always search for more substantive things like company or industry or stuff like that. Next one, having an un-parseable resume. If it never gets through the computer, it's never gonna get through a human. So use a standard format, use a standard file format, make sure it's going to get through all these parsers correctly so that when it does get to a human, they're ready to go and it's easy for them to parse because that's the next stage, right? So you want to set yourself up for success with people by making sure it gets through the computer right and not coming out mangled or just getting filtered out in the first place. If you weigh everything equally, if you think that they're equally interested in everything, you're going to spend not enough time talking about the things they're actually interested in and you're just going to seem like a mediocre candidate. You want to really hone in on the things that are of interest to them and incredibly relevant to this role and hyper index on that. That's what's going to actually get you hired. And then lastly, just not prepping enough. Make sure you get your reps in, make sure you stay warm. Think about what questions or what parts of your resume they're most likely to ask about and run through answering those questions just a couple times. It doesn't take a ton and it can make a huge difference. These are just 5 of the reasons I have gotten rejected before and I've seen a lot of other people get rejected. Getting a job today is pretty difficult and we want to ensure we do everything properly so we maximize our chances of success. In addition to the actual technical work we do, there's a ton of other things we need to know about. And so if you're interested in other content that's going to help you get your dream job, then this is definitely the channel for you. I'm the Unhinged Engineer. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.